I'm Brian Williams, and I am here with Jeff Goins, the author of The In Between and Wrecked, which is now available on Vyrso.com. It's spelled Vyrso.com. And we're going to interview him a little bit about his new book, The In Between. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey Brian, good to be with you.
So we just wanted to start off and provide our viewers a little bit more background on your story. I know you share a lot of stories about who you are. I feel like I have a better understanding of who you are already, and we've never met. But could you give Verso subscribers just an idea of who you are?
Sure. Well, I'm a writer, and that's kind of a newer title that I'm trying to own. But I've written my whole life, but never considered myself a writer until a few years ago when I had a conversation with a friend where he asked me what my dream was, and I said I didn't know, and he said that he thought it was to be a writer, and I said, yeah, I guess I'd like to be a writer someday. And he said, Jeff, you don't have to want to be a writer. You are a writer. You just need to write. And that started this journey about 2.5 years ago of me starting a new blog and starting to share some ideas that I'd never shared before online, and that grew into a pretty large platform in a short amount of time, which led to me being able to publish these books and become a full-time writer. So that's kind of the condensed story. Before I did that, I was a marketing director for a nonprofit organization. I live in the southeast U.S., and but I'm originally from Chicago.
Awesome. Thanks. So I know you talk about small stories throughout the in-between, and they seem like inspirations for the overall book, but could you pinpoint maybe one specific story for why you wrote the in-between?
Yeah, well, the story that I think has the most meaning for me is the story of my son being born. If you read the book, there's a lot of big stories from me meeting my wife to studying abroad in Spain. Pretty momentous occasions, but
Hmm.
the interesting thing about the book is I don't actually write about those big moments or write about everything leading up to it. And the point of the book, as you know, Brian, is to learn how to embrace the smaller moments of life, because that's really what most of life is made of. So when my son was born, he was actually born 4.5 weeks early,
Hmm.
which created a lot of stress and confusion for us. We didn't know that he was going to be a preemie. We actually went in for our 35 week checkup, and they said, yeah, he's coming out today.
Oh wow.
And there was just a lot of fear and not knowing. And so that whole day, I was texting and calling friends,
Hmm.
waiting for my wife to go into the OR to have her C-section. And there was this moment while they were, operating on her, where they told us that his lungs might not work right because they were still, he was still learning how to use his lungs. And so if he came out and he couldn't breathe, they'd have to take him away and take him somewhere that I didn't know. And so, but they said if he cries, you will know that he's okay, and then you can hold him. But if he doesn't, we're gonna have to take him away. And so I remember being in that operating room, holding my wife's hand, and there was this blue cloth separating us from what was happening, on the other side of the cloth where they were, where our son was coming out into the world. And I remember just not knowing, and just having to trust, and remember praying and being afraid and doing all this stuff. And then there was this moment where they pulled him out, and we could hear him come out, and they said, oh, there's a leg and there's an arm, and I was hoping that they meant these were attached, to all together.
Yeah.
And they pulled him out, and there was silence. And in that moment, it wasn't a long moment, but it felt forever. And we didn't say anything, we didn't look at each other, we just waited. And in that moment, I knew that I had a choice. I could be afraid or I could trust. And then, so I chose to, fill that moment not with fear but with faith. And then the next moment, I heard a wonderful, loud baby's cry. And I like that story, and he was okay, and he's been great ever since. But I like that story because it really, I think, paints a picture of what the whole book is about, which is all we have in life are these moments of waiting, of anticipation, sometimes fear, of dread that something bad might happen, and sometimes bad things do happen. But that's not the point. The point is all we have is this moment where we don't know. We don't know how everything's going to turn out, and we can choose to fill that moment with fear or with faith. And I've done both, and have some regrets and celebrations of uh, using those moments well, and also wasting them. And the in between really is a call to not waste those moments of waiting.
Right, right. That's really great. Um, I know that my wife and I really struggle with that as younger adults, where
Yeah,
we feel like we're always waiting and waiting for whatever could be next.
yeah,
And I think your book really speaks to our generation, and really provides a clear understanding that those moments where we do wait are moments we can take advantage of, but also just rest and relax.
yeah,
Um,
totally.
so, can you tell us a little bit more about what's the best way to embrace the in-between or seemingly mundane aspects of our lives?
Yeah, well, there's basically three things that I wanted people to take away from the book. Three lessons that we learn in the in between, and I'll tell you what they are, so you don't have to read the book, but hopefully you will anyway. Um, and these are the lessons that I learned when I was going back and I was looking at some of these significant moments in my life, and I shared these stories in hopes that people would hear about the story of my son being born, or me getting married, or when I became a writer, or when I saw my grandfather during his last few days on Earth before he passed, and my hope is when people read those stories, they think of their own stories and moments that they can in turn cherish. And so I think there are basically three lessons of the in between, three goals that we should aspire for, that we learn when we can't do anything. We can't do anything but wait. We can't rush ahead to the next moment. I think we all understand that there are these seasons in life where you just kind of feel stuck. You haven't got that job. You haven't met that girl. You're not making the kind of money that you want to make, or you don't live in the city that you would dream of living. Whatever, you're just not quite where you'd like to be. And in those moments, we can be present or just kind of check out. And when we're present, when we embrace in between, I think we learn three things. The first is we learn how to slow down. I think our culture moves too quickly. It's very easy to get caught up in the rush and just go from thing to thing to thing. But when we do that too much, we find ourselves always rushing to the next thing, never really being present to where we are right now. And so the second lesson is to let go, to let go of control. In the case of that story with my son, I realized in that moment, as I was waiting for something to happen, anything, that I was not in control, that I had to let go. And that's scary, but there's also a certain amount of freedom of realizing everything turning out okay doesn't completely hinge on me. That there are things out of my control, and all I can do is trust and sometimes just let go and say, well, I know that one way or the other that this is going to be okay, and I can't manipulate it or coerce circumstances into being anything more than what they are. And then the last lesson is when we slow down, when we let go, I think we learn to be grateful for what's right in front of us. And it's so easy, and
Mm.
I really struggle with this, so easy to want a little bit more. There's that famous story, I can't remember who said it, but this person was talking to this young, hungry entrepreneur, and they said, how much money do you need to make in order for you to be satisfied? And he replied, just a little bit more. And I think that's sort of the mentality that our culture has towards everything. It's a culture of
Right.
excess, and so we have to be really careful, because if we, in our wanting more, we can be ungrateful and not appreciate the things that we have right now. And the reality is, if you can't appreciate what you have now, what makes you think you're going to
Mm.
appreciate what you have later?
Right. Right. So, with that in mind, what audience is your book really intended for?
That's a good question. I think the book is, I mean, certainly I wanted it to appeal to a lot of people, and I think every author goes, "Oh, I want everybody to read my book." I think it will especially resonate with anybody who identifies strongly with this idea of feeling stuck. And I try to cover a lot of different areas of life, from family to career to relationships, from parenthood to marriage to even, an interaction that I had with my mom when I was a teenager, and how I went from not really appreciating home to realizing that home is this place that you can always return to. But I think it's for anybody who goes, man, I'm just not quite where I want to be. So anybody who goes, hey, life is everything that I ever thought it would be, and I'm feeling great about everything. I mean, that's awesome. Good for you. The rest of us hate you, but good for you. This book is for anybody who feels stuck, and no matter how hard they try or hustle, they can't get out of that stuckness. And this is not a book to get you unstuck. It's to help you realize that sometimes that stuckness can teach you some of life's greatest lessons.
That's really, really good, Jeff. I know that I value that a lot. Something that I've noticed throughout your writing, you do a very good job of not necessarily being uh, overly pushing your faith, but I know that you have woven it beautifully in throughout your book.
Hmm.
How does your faith really affect your writing?
Good question. So I interviewed. I actually interviewed the person who wrote my foreword, an author by the name of Shauna Niequist, who's a brilliant writer. If you buy the book and you hate it, at least you got her foreword, which is brilliant. I asked her once. I said, "Are you a?" She's the daughter of a preacher, and I said, "Are you a Christian writer or just a writer?" And I think most people in America at least understand what that means. That there's sort of there's mainstream culture, and then there's Christian culture.
Right.
Um, and she said, I understand what you're saying here, but I choose to not. I can't remember exactly what she said, but I choose to not, you know, uh, I choose to not identify with this dichotomy of are you this or are you that. And then she took it a step further. She said, I'm a Christian everything. I'm a Christian mom. I'm a
Mhm.
Christian this. I'm a Christian that. And I think that with art, especially when you intersect faith and religion into those things, there's this sense of well, this is just art, and then there's Christian art or Buddhist art or whatever, where there's this religious agenda. And I'm not really interested in that kind of art. What I am interested in is, I am a Christian and I am a person of faith, and so everything that I create is going to reflect that. But there's no agenda
Hmm.
here for me to make you agree with everything that I'm talking about. And so what I want to do as a writer is I want to connect with the human experience, and then I want to share what I understand to be my truth. And if other people identify with that and resonate with it, great. But first and foremost, I want to connect with the audience, and then I want to share a truth with them that they may not have thought. And I want to do it in terms that are accessible to everybody. So this book is a book written by me, and I am a Christian. I don't think of it as a Christian book, mostly because books don't have souls. But it's a lot of my stories, and you're going to see. At times you're going to see my faith, and at other times you're going to see my fear, and at other times you're going to see my doubt. But yeah, I mean, you're going to experience that, but I'm not really trying to make it overt, and at the same time I'm not trying to make it subtle. This is just me, and you're going to see these themes in my life, but the point of the stories is not to necessarily push any certain worldview. It's just to identify with people's experiences, and in that you're going to get some of my personality, my perspective as well.
Hmm. That's great, Jeff. I know our readers will definitely appreciate that as they read the book and as well as they go through life. So finally, why should people read your book?
Well, because it's short and it's cheap. I've had several friends tell me that they, read the book in one sitting, which I think is a compliment. But yeah, it is a quick read. I mean, I remember picking it up after, I've read it a few times, obviously. But when I got the actual paperback, I read it pretty quickly. It takes just a few hours to read. Um, People should read the book if they think it's going to connect with them. If you like good stories and you're willing to kind of weave your way through a story to get to a point, you're going to probably like this book. If you want 5 tips for how to do this, that, or the other thing, this book probably isn't for you. There are practical elements of the book, but it's a lot of story. And the reason that I did that was because I learned all of these lessons by slowing down and taking my time and not taking a shortcut. And so it was important to me in how I told the story to be deliberate and share how some of these lessons are drawn out over a long period of time of waiting. Now, I guess if I really wanted to take that to the nth degree, I would have made the book like 500 pages or something. But I think it is a quick read, and if you like good stories and you identify with this theme of waiting in your life and waiting for the next big thing and struggling to be present to where you are, it's going to speak to that, and it's going to provide some answers. And it's also not going to fully resolve that tension, because I don't think that tension gets resolved in life until we die. But I think it will give you some language to talk about and understand those moments where we feel a little bit stuck.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. We appreciate having you here. And if you are interested in buying the In Between or Jeff's old book, Wrecked, they're both available on Verso today. So feel free to download them. And just thank you so much for your time, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. It's my pleasure.
All right, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.